We are in conversation with Gautam Kumra of McKinsey. He's heading Asia at McKinsey from the sidelines of Global Business Summit. Gautam, thank you very much for chatting with us.
Nice to see you.
Talking to you after a very long time. So, between when you left India and repositioned in Singapore and now, what are the big observations you've seen in India?
Oh, well, I think it's fair to say that I think the excitement of India has certainly grown dramatically in the last 2 years. Well, part of it is a reflection of, I think, some of the other parts of the world aren't looking so good. I think everyone's talking about a looming recession in the US. I think Europe is under structural difficulty, and China, I think, is going a different ballgame for the last 2 years. So a lot of attention on Asia, and I think markets like India, Indonesia, and Vietnam have, frankly, just getting a lot more interest and attention from global investors and everyone.
Gautam, you're traveling across the world. What are your thoughts on the recession? Will it be a soft landing in your view? Hard landing? Markets are scared. You have your hands on a lot of corporations across the world. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, obviously, as you said, even the best economists have failed to predict when and if you have a recession, and I wouldn't venture a guess. You know, the reality, what's happening is, I think it's not just about the economic recession. I think we are faced in a scenario where there are discontinuous changes happening on multiple fronts, right? We've seen the power of technology, and I think AI is going to drive the next decade. I think we're seeing a fundamental shift in geopolitics. I think we've seen there's so much talk about deglobalization. But actually, by the way, the reality is very different. I'll come back to that because the fact remains that while trade has now stabilized, the activity in non-trade, for example, services, intellectual property, are growing quite fast even now. So, but still, there's a lot of debate about deglobalization and so on. And finally, the contrary data, right? The reality is that corporate balance sheets have been quite strong. We've seen that in India, we've seen that elsewhere in the world. And frankly, the wage market remains very tight, which is not what we would expect if you're heading into a recession immediately. So there are a lot of mixed signals, and it's not just an economic discussion, it's a discussion that now cuts across economics, geopolitics, supply chain resilience, and technology. And I think that's what business leaders have to think through, what it means for them.
Is India coming up in conversations overseas, be it investors, large corporations you work with?
I think it certainly is. I think sometimes our view of India's position on the world stage is a little different when you're sitting here versus when you're sitting outside.
Exactly.
I think certainly you sense a lot of excitement when you're here and when you have foreign visitors here. It's certainly coming up more in discussion globally. But I also would say that we're still in early days of India truly capturing the imagination. I think we still have, the potential is way bigger than the reality, and that's one of the things that keeps investors at bay. But interest is increasing.
Yeah, you can see that.
It's increasing.
How about policy making? How are you observing policy making here? Can we attract high quality global corporations at much more faster pace in coming years? That's what the idea is.
That's what the idea is. I think the reality is that, look, if you look at India, certainly as we know, for us to continue to grow, and whether it's third largest, 5 trillion, whatever you want to call it, I think manufacturing as an example has to go up from 15, 16 to 20 to 25% of GDP. We can't produce enough jobs if we remain only a services-driven economy. So sectors like manufacturing, construction had to take off. And frankly, we have to be able to attract investors. And I think the pace of reform has to be maintained, whether it's labor and land markets. I think, look, investors want lower cost of doing business, better infrastructure, more reliability of policy. These are all things that are doable. And I think if you look at some of the early signs coming out of the PLI scheme in India, it's very encouraging. I think we seem to have made some good first few steps, and now it's a question of follow through.
In fact, in this budget as well, we did see quite a lot of focus on upping the capex, the railway capex, putting more money in rural and tier 2, tier 3. Do you see that also playing a big part in achieving the idea which we spoke about earlier?
I think, look, infrastructure spending, I think we all realize that, look, India, one of the things that has not happened in the last couple of years is the level of investment spend. Right? And I think government certainly has a key role to play, and I think we better spend money spent here than anywhere else. So I think infrastructure is a big force multiplier, I think, in terms of generating income, and I think those are all positive steps.
What are some of the risks on the global side? People, investors, as well as big global corporations who are working should bear in mind going forward?
This is not just India, I mean globally.
Globally.
Yeah. No, I think, look, one of the biggest things is geopolitics. I think today every CEO is wondering, how do I build resilience in a model? What if I have to exit a certain market? What if the world fractures? What does that do to my supply chain? What does that do to my markets? How do I get predictability in my business model? So the one big thing, which was not on people's agenda, if you think about geopolitical muscle, was not a muscle that CEOs have grown with. Supply chain resilience. equally. You know, how do I think about, earlier it was always a question of cost, but it's no longer that.
Sure.
It's reliability, it's, it's robustness, all of that. That's a new language for CEOs to think about. Energy transition, this is on everyone's minds. Every board, every company, every investor is thinking about that today. So if you're a CEO today, navigating the world is not what it used to look like 5 years ago.
One of the reports from McKinsey which caught attention was that this is India's century. Even Prime Minister Modi alluded to that report. Your global CEO mentioned that.
Yes.
How convinced are you? Because when you go and meet corporations across the world, and you're saying that we still have to make a mark as we desire in a full manner. Why does the McKinsey team believe that it could actually be India's century?
You see, there are many fundamental demographics in our favor. You look at, firstly, India has, by 2050, 1 in 5 people in the world is going to be working in India, right? And we are the only country other than Africa continent which will have growing working population till 2075. China is declining. I think many of the large world big countries are declining, so that's one. Second is the consumption. We're going to add 100 million households just in the next 10 years to consumption. That's going to take India's share of private consumption from 3% to 10%. Think about that. 1 in 10 dollars is going to be consumed here. 1 in 5 people are going to be working here, right? Look at energy transition. I think that plays to India's favor because a lot of the investment, a lot of the capacity still has to be built, unlike other markets where you have to transform it. And finally, the whole thing about digital. You see, India is leading the world. I think in digital economy, it's second fastest digitizing country in the world. That's opening up new possibilities. So when I add all of that, and then finally the spirit of the entrepreneur and the ambition and the confidence of young aspiring India, I think we have a lot in our favor that could make this India century.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, Gautam.
Thank you.